Presentation. Okay, perfect. Uh, yeah, thank you and welcome everyone. Today, Dhyani and I have come from Quicksand Design Studio to talk a little bit about the design thinking process and how it can be used within the public health domain and specifically for your relevance also in public health messaging and creating tools. Uh, yeah, and if we hope you were able to see our brief bios on the slide. We can move to the next slide. Quicksand itself, the organization we come from, is a design strategy and innovation consultancy headquartered in India. We have three offices in Goa, Bangalore, and Delhi, and our work is mainly situated in emerging markets and developing contexts. So, a lot of work in Asia, South Asia, a lot of work in Africa, some work in South America, and our work is mostly focused in these developing and context and emerging markets. And the process that we use, which Dhyani will go in depth into, is called design thinking or human centered design. And the goal essentially there is whatever strategy and innovation work that we do, it has to be solely centered or focused around the experiences of the end users, the challenges of the end users, the needs of the end users, and the context they're situated in. So they are the center of any innovation or any strategy work that we do with Quicksand. We work with global corporations to invest. Dhani, if you can stay on the previous slide only. Yeah, so with global corporations, we work to just imagine new business opportunities and strategies. We work with international development partners as well as non-governmental organizations on the ground to drive social impact through innovation. And we also, on the side, do our own incubation of entrepreneurial projects and open platforms for to just drive innovation and creativity within the organization. Next slide. Uh, Here is just a broad spectrum of the type of work we do and the recent projects that we have done. So it goes from anywhere from innovations in education for children in refugee contexts to gamification of very corporate experiences to exploring the future of workplaces to creating public engagement strategies for smart cities to reimagining customer experiences uh, to innovating and creating new products and beverages to understand how we can radically change how women perceive contraceptives or how family planning is perceived uh, within our target populations. It could be imagining alternate futures for the Internet of Things, or even exploring new media like how AR and VR can be used within the Indian context. Uh, and yeah, then next slide, please. Some of the sectors we work in more relevant for the talk today at least would be we have done a lot of work in the public health sector. We have done a lot of work in water and sanitation. We have done a lot of work in environment and sustainability, and also a lot of work within education and livelihoods. And within all of this, the idea has been to be able to understand user behaviors and stories from the ground and use that or leverage that to innovate within these spaces, to be able to come up with new products, new services, to be able to improve existing products and existing services. So like a broad range of projects and yeah, a broad range of activities, but centered around this uh, common process of human-centered design, which Dhani will take you into greater detail as we move forward. We can go to the next slide. This is yeah, and we also are part of this network called the Reach Network of similar design research and strategy firms across the country and across the world. And the idea there is that we are able to then leverage this network and collaborate with many different partners and organizations from across the world to do projects in emerging markets and developing contexts, like I had mentioned before. And I think the next slide is yeah, so these are just our details, and we'll also put this in chat later if anyone wants to reach out for any further projects or any support or any ideas. We are always available. But with that introduction, I'll just hand it over to Dhyani to take you through yeah, the talk today. And yeah, really nice to be here.
Hello everyone, my name is Dhyani. I'm a design researcher at Quicksand and I've worked with React before on one of the projects that we did together. Essentially, as a agency based in India, a lot of our research and work is based in the context and considering the problems and diverse characteristics that India comes with. So if you can see, there's a statistic on the screen that talks about how a lot of Indians go without basic sanitation services. And what design thinking sort of enables you is to generate inquiries out of these facts, out of these research sort of statements. Considering about health, there is also this idea of how do we stress on the concept of health as people's right. And you when we talk about healthcare, it's not an issue that happens in isolation. There's a lot of other aspects that interconnect with healthcare, that is financial stability, health standards, discrimination and stigma. And how does design, so what we're going to further talk about is how does design thinking sort of helps make this entire process of finding solutions more user centric, and makes us more empathetic towards considering all these multiple ecosystems into picture, like bring them into picture when we're looking for solutions that should help all of us create solutions that are very optimized and very well thought of. Mhm. So basically, what challenges when we look at all of these issues that present to us as statistics or data or things that we look around that are really complex? They have a lot of interconnected ecosystems that play a role why these challenges exist in the first place. These problems don't have a linear solution altogether, and they need a very multifaceted approach to sort of figure out and solve them. So we're looking at the challenge of behavior as to what is the reason why people behave a certain way. Why do these problems occur in the first place? What are we look when we think of change in people? What do we aim to produce that sort of brings this behavior change in people? Then this challenge of technology, when we have solutions that that are technologically based, where are we, what is the context are we putting them in? So there's a statistic that less than 50% of India is sort of well versed with technology. So considering the context is very important to make sure that we have a context that is right to pitch a particular solution. Then this challenge of policy, a lot of promising inventions are sort of incentivized by bringing in the policy for that particular innovation, and in these sectors it cannot be done without implementing those policies. So there's also challenge of bringing in policies within within these sectors. Mhm. Then this challenge of systems, when we look at, like I mentioned earlier, healthcare, you have a lot of other stakeholders and relationships that come into picture that you have to consider at all these systems. So there's also this there's also this aspect of bringing in and considering all these stakeholders that are into picture, and that any solution that we sort of devise needs to be considerate of all of them together. And then there's the challenge of patience, that with design thinking, with all the iterations that you do, with all the solutions or the innovative services or sort of techniques that at the end become your output, cannot bring about a change in seconds. It's not a quick fix. It is also, there's a proper engagement that is needed for a certain time. There's patience that you need to see a change over the time, of course, that you apply or implement your solution. So we'll further move into design thinking as a process. So design thinking is not just an output, but it's a process of approaching a solution or trying to discover an innovative way of doing something. So it's more a creative solutions focused approach, particularly relevant for complex innovation challenges, which we'll learn about further. So if you see, design thinking has three key domains, which is people, practice, and process. When we talk about people, there is, like Aditya mentioned, a very user-centric approach to problems. You want to keep user at the center. You want to have these values of empathy while you're practicing design thinking. You want to make sure that whatever solution you devise, there is accountability and ownership for that solution in terms of who you're designing for. Practice, in terms of practice, it's a very interdisciplinary practice. Like you have all these ecosystems that are sort of interconnected with each other. With health, let's say with healthcare, you have housing, you have financial stability, you have stigma, all of these problems that are really interconnected. And the practice, the interdisciplinary nature of design thinking really helps you provide space for collaborative sense making and cross pollination of ideas across different domains of people. And lastly, there is process. What happens with design thinking is it's a very cyclic process. It works in iterations. So you sort of ideate, you empathize, you try to create solutions, and you test them. And you repeat the process till a point where you feel like this is the most optimum solution that you can get out of these, or out of this problem statement. Moving on to human-centered design. Human-centered design, it's been interpreted in multiple ways, but it's said to have 5 core stages. So there's a way of going about it. But like I said, it's very cyclic. So you can, move across the domains. You can empathize, you can define, you can research, you can prototype, and then you can again go back to research. And you can follow the same process till you find out more and more and see what is the core issue and what solution works best. So so there are 5 core stages that move from deep contextual understanding of people's lives and the larger ecosystem, and you move towards the synthesis of ideas and concepts and solutions that can work in the real world. So like I said, you empathize, you define your problem, you ideate solutions for your problem, you prototype them, and then you test them. But what happens in reality is that you have a lot of issues and you keep on sort of iterating them in a cyclic manner. So you keep on going back to empathizing, you keep going back to your people, the people you worked with your solutions. You see they take their feedback, and then you incorporate their feedback as changes, and you prototype again. So that is something that you have to keep in mind, that it's not a linear process. No solution is a linear process. The engagement with the solution is not a linear process. It's something that's very cyclic, it's circular in manner, and you keep iterating till you get to a point where you actually see some change. So one of the very common sort of examples of this little story that I can start with, just to give you an example of human-centered design, is Doug Dietz from GE Healthcare created an MRI machine, which was very sleek, which was very good looking as a design sort of a product. It was like, it had a matte finish and things like that. And he did it for pediatric patients. What he realized that while using the machine, around 80% of the patients had to be sedated because they were so scared of something so huge and actually going inside it. So what happened right after that, that he sort of sat with a lot of creators and artists and designers and tried to sort out a solution that would make this machine easy to view for the patients. Because at the end of the day, you are designing for the patients. You want to make a product that is very, very comfortable. And they came up with this adventure series of MRI machines that sort of made it like a voyage for the kids to enter. And what they noticed, that the process of sedating the pediatric patients before giving them the screening reduced drastically. So this is one of the most common design thinking from a very real life perspective. So maybe I can share the link with you later, but it's a very common example of trying to make people understand how does human-centered design work in such a sort of complex context of healthcare and sort of these complex domains that require very knowledge that require scientific knowledge, but still you have these design thinking as a process that can help you create something that is more acceptable and more likable. So Quicksand has its own articulation. So we at Quicksand have our own articulation of the HCD, that's the human-centered design process, which is summarized through three simple steps, which is meeting people, telling stories, and crafting experiences. So we can move on to each of them, and I can explain how each of them work as your process. It's the same process of empathizing and trying to create a problem statement, trying to sort of tell stories and then craft experiences. So meeting people. So the first one is like we mentioned repeatedly, how it's a user-centered process. A human-centered design works with when you go out and meet people, when you capture their experiences, when you try and empathize to what they've been through. You try to make the process very user-centric. You try to make sure that your solution incorporates what all they've been through and their problems in the first place. And you create a sense of ownership amongst them as well, to use what you create for them. So we always start with making sure that our entry point to the innovation journey is through people's needs and desires. Second is telling stories. So stories and narratives have the power to inspire. The films that we watch, the books that we read, they generate this emotion of being relating to people, of inspiring us, of having different ideas to do something else. And that's what we try to do at Quicksand as well. So we tell stories in a lot of multimedia ways of going. There's a lot of multimedia ways of going about it, which is like either comics or microsites or films. um, and trying to make sure that they sort of convey what we have to say. And finally, there's crafting experiences. So it's basically when you reach towards the end of the project, when you have your research in place, your problem statement, all the considerations that you've made, and you want to finally design a product or a service, and your output can be anything. It can be a microsite or a toolkit or a service or an organizational change that you're trying to imply. And how do you do it? How do you craft that experience in a way that it seamlessly sort of enters into the current system that you're trying to sort of disrupt? So that is crafting experiences. And we finally move on to one of the case studies that I can share with you that Quicksand did. So this was a project with Wellcome Trust, where Quicksand explored the informal medicine ecosystem in India. It tried to understand different contexts in which the informal medicine exists, and different geographies of where these people exist, and what do they read, or how does it take place. And the final outcome was an installation across places that talked to people and informed them about how is the informal medicine ecosystem that exists in India as such. So if you can see on the left, there is this setup that has these different stories of in ways in which the informal medicine manifests in itself. Second is the future of contraceptives, which was these 2 sessions of brainstorming between participants in India and Kenya to sort of explore ways in which contraceptives can be more accepted, or different innovation in them. So these were brainstorming workshops. And as you can see in the pictures, there's use of visual, there's use of storytelling, there's use of brainstorming using gamification ideas and all of that, to try and get to try and bring people together from different sort of disciplines, and then make them brainstorm and have this collaborative process of discovering new ways. This is the project that we did with React on AMR. And here we started, like, we can go a little bit more briefly into this, because this is something that I was also a part of. So basically we started with healthcare system, and what we first realized, like we mentioned earlier, there is this term called as systems thinking, wherein you take all the multiple sort of ecosystems that are a part of a bigger web of systems, where you keep in mind the causality of what causes the issues, the interconnectedness between the systems. There's multiple stakeholders, and what is the most optimum mitigation method to go about it, and how do you start with the primary research. So we looked at antimicrobial resistance as a phenomenon, how it occurs, and all the different aspects that it sort of involves, and the drivers of behavior. So what are the different behaviors that are exhibited by people, and what drives those behaviors? We try to understand antimicrobial resistance as a complex problem, and sort of what it comes across as, and also helped up sort of create inquiries around it to how to mitigate it in the first place. So if you see, we tried to look at inquiries around AMR. So we wanted to look at regulation. How would regulation work in terms of business opportunities, or financial balance, or strengthening surveillance, and behaviors as well? How do you look at consumers who directly impact AMR in India? So how do you understand theory of change, or the mode of communication when it comes to AMR? And also preventions. How do you prevent the acceleration? How do you understand treatment of waste, the low cost diagnosis, alternatives to antibiotics, prescription patterns? So we try to understand all of those inquiries and put together in a map, and see if there's some some communication tool possible for it. So one of the aspects of the project that I can share was participatory research. It was very important to understand that we sort of, after a point, started working with farmers, like poultry farmers, and that became our focus. So towards the end, we wanted to make sure that they're involved in the process. So we had like 1 hour interviews, guided interviews, and we had a recruitment process. We also had a survey with veterinarians. So it was very important to make sure that you have these different stakeholders that you're designing for included in the process in the first place. So these are the pictures that we received, and we had like a lot of different suggestions from people about how we wanted to go with the toolkit that we were making. So towards the end, we created a biosecurity and disease prevention toolkit, and we had a lot of communication tools that helped us provoke dialogue and provoke discussion. So one of the examples that I can share with you is this One Health. Is this dialogue blueprint around One Health approach. So One Health approach is basically, since you will know, of course, is the approach wherein you consider environmental health, human health, and animal health together, and you have discussions around them. So this blueprint sort of helped map stakeholders that were interconnected between these three domains of health. At the same time, solutions that would be useful, that would be optimum, considering, let's say, two of them together, or two of them, or three of them together. So you have this understanding and dialogue around understanding power, responsibilities, and different domains of health. So this blueprint is like a communication tool. This blueprint helps you provoke dialogue. It's not sort of explaining you anything, but it wants you to think in a certain way, which is the One Health approach. So one of the examples of design thinking can be this, wherein you want to provoke a certain kind of dialogue and then go ahead with it. And yeah, towards the end, just like understanding again that human-centered design is a part of design thinking as well, which is a process that is cyclic, that is iterative, that moves from empathy to sort of ideating, to prototyping, to testing, and to understand that there's no linear solution, there's no quick fix to problems. You have to be slow, you have to be patient, and you have to make sure that you're designing for the people, and you include them in the process as well. And finally, if Aditya would like to
Yes.
go.
Thanks, Dani. I can take it from here. So, given that like you all will also be like developing your own projects, I'm not sure like where in that process you currently are. It's just important to also keep in mind, and we also understand that with the like since the lockdown and the pandemic, it's this process of like it's easy to say like research with the user or keep them at the center of anything you do, but it's becoming more and more difficult to actually go and engage with them, spend valuable time with them, to understand their context, to understand like who your population is, what their needs are. So like we do understand that it is getting more and more difficult, and like we are at Quicksand also we still have to keep innovating internally to figure out how do we like stay true to the end user, to the person we are, in your case I think communicating to, the person we are sending a message to. Like how do we make sure that it's impactful, it leads to behavior change, it doesn't just get forgotten, it sticks with the users. And so there's some things to keep in mind for in this process is that what we want to do is to seek stories and not uh, if you can go to the yeah, and not opinion. So the idea, what we have through our practice also learned, is that stories, it could be through secondary research as well, it could be through desk research that you do before developing your toolkits and your projects. The idea is that what a story can capture is much more complex than any one opinion or any one like statement that anyone shares with you. So even when you're looking to understand your community, your population group, it's better to like look for stories, ask for stories, like not what do you think about this, but rather can you tell me about your experience with this, or can you tell me about a day where you did this, and then you get a story from that you can then use and take many things out from. You can take out stuff like who does this person trust, who does the community trust when it comes to communication, what type of language do they prefer when they want to receive communication, do they prefer like when it comes from a local leader, when it comes from a popular star, when it's less scientific, when it's more scientific, when it is funny, when it is serious. So you start to like begin to get those things when you seek out stories rather than opinions. Because also with opinions, the problem is that people usually will like tell you what they think you want to hear, which in a story won't come out. In a story it will be more pure, and then you can glean from that what you want to. uh, the second is, the idea is to understand motivations and not just behaviors. So it's one thing to just understand, like this is what they do, this is what, uh, like these are the three things they do in their day, or these are the three things they do at work, and these are the three things they do when they're reading the newspaper. But what we want to understand through these stories are the motivations of the needs behind those behaviors. So when they pick up a newspaper instead of turning on the TV, why are they doing that? Why are they not, like what is their motivation behind choosing one option over the other? What is their motivation behind waking up at a certain time rather than a different time? What is their motivation behind sharing some communication forward versus another? Maybe there are only particular types of communication or messages that sticks with them and they share forward within their families or their community. What motivates them to do that? What about that message or that communication leads them to that? So that's also something that is really important to understand through the process of building this a toolkit or a project around this. The third is to be really prolific with ideas and not judge them early on. When you begin to ideate, to think of options for your projects or for what could be what you create, don't be shy and don't never judge them early on. It's much better to have all your ideas, however crazy or out there they may be. It's always better to have them all listed out before you start judging them or figuring out what is viable, and start putting out more real like parameters to them, like what is viable within the time I have, with the budget I have, what can I do. If this is the community I'm engaging with, maybe these 10 ideas won't work. But just wait, like first step is to have all of that on the board with you before you start judging them and prioritizing which ones will actually work and which ones you can actually implement. The next is make things and don't just describe them. And here the essence of the work we do also is that sometimes when you like just explain an idea or an approach through a statement, a lot of or a lot of things that you're imagining in your mind, or a lot of things that are there is there in your mind does not get communicated well enough. And so it often helps. You don't need to be a designer. I don't have any design background or any design skill. I studied economics and maths. But the idea is to not like make a beautiful thing, but the idea is to make a thing that communicates your what you want to do better than just a statement could. And this also helps when you are like Dhyani mentioned, when you take things back uh, to the field to test them out and to like take things to the user, share, tell them these are the 10 ideas I have, what do you think about them. They will be able to respond much better to ideas that are not statements but have something more to it. It could be it could be you, if it's a toolkit you're making, it could be like a very rough paper prototype of that toolkit. You could take a cardboard box, you could put 10 sheets of paper on it. Each sheet of paper could represent a different idea that you have. So, like, the more like dimensions your idea has or your toolkit has, or will like it will help communicating that better to the end users as well when you are testing your ideas or your toolkits with them. And it's important to test it uh, before you finalize on what your idea is. It's important to test out a couple. And the last one is teamwork wins matches and not just your ace batsman. And it's very important to not be stuck in a silo alone working on your project. Even if within the structure of your project, you everyone has to make individual toolkits. It's it's still very important to uh, like work with people around you. It could be your colleagues, it could be other people who are not part of the project, but it's always good to have people to bounce off your ideas off of and not work in silos. And that's something like we also make sure to do within teams. Like if we are a team of 5 people, we all come from very different backgrounds, we all bring in very different perspectives, and it helps to have that in order to like create a solution or an innovation that will work the best. Because in silos it just doesn't happen. You don't get that level of diversity that you need to build or create an idea that is actually impactful. uh, so yeah, I think that's all we have in terms of the presentation. But we would like to just open it up uh, to the participants here in case you have any questions or any critiques or anything you think doesn't make sense or anything you want to know more about. We just wanted to keep it a little open and hear from you about your personal experiences as well, because all of us use this process like at some like in some level or the other. No one, like it's not something that is a completely new process. Everyone does this. So yeah, just wanted to hear from you also whether you have any thoughts, questions, critiques to what we have said, and we can take it from there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Aditya and Dani. That was indeed a wonderful session. Very insightful, I should say. Any questions or comments? Floor is open.
It could also be like any challenges you're facing in if you begun your work. I don't know in what part of the stage of the competition we are or whether it's begun or not. But like if you have, uh, sorry, yes.
Sorry, I think earlier you were not able to unmute yourself, but now
Oh,
I've enabled that function.
Hi, my name is Hera. I want to know when you first start with the project, you mentioned that there are different steps to when you start designing a toolkit. But when you first start with the project with the team, what would you suggest would be the best thing to do? Like before you, like as part of doing research and as part of before you start meeting your people and things, like how do you start with the brainstorming session?
Danny, you want to take that or should I?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't mind. So essentially what we start with is usually desk research is to try and get a context of what you're facing, of what are the basic things that you know you're going to address. So basically a secondary research from books, from websites, and then you try and gather this list of experts or people. You set constraints as you move on for your design, you know, when you go back, when you want to, you know, because you can't solve everything. So when you start with, you can start big, you can start looking at the problem from a very macro perspective. But as you move on, you need to start setting more constraints to it. You need to start setting boundaries. So you have these terms like a demographic, a target audience, and you know all of these that help you, you know, sort of move your solution towards a very specific user or towards a very specific set of things that it does. So yeah, I think this entire process of moving from a very macro level to understanding the systems that are there, you know, to be mindful of whatever that you're considering and researching, and then you move to a very micro sort of a lens and you just focus on the things that you want to focus on.
I had also one question, like where in the process are you currently at? Like, have you, like, do you have an idea in mind or a thing that you want to communicate or, yeah. So just wanted to, because there's also, uh, like that could also be one thing that one goal to have is just to even know what is it that you want to communicate through the toolkit, or what is it, what change do you want to like what is your end goal basically. And also like Dhyani mentioned, maybe the population, like based on what your challenge or your idea is, the population already is very small. For example, if you're creating some communication for TB patients in a particular city, then that will already maybe narrow down your scope a lot as to like what do you even need to understand. You need to understand the like the health system's perspective on like what are the different points at which a TB patient interacts with the health system, and then you also have to understand the experience of the TB patient themselves and what challenges they are facing, what problems they face when interacting with the health system, what needs of theirs aren't being met, and finding those gaps that then your toolkit or your solution can help bridge. So that broad scoping of just the whole system is where you would start.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Hi. I had a very small question, or maybe like a suggestion. Like you've mentioned, like we can use an interview or a secondary desk research for. Hello. Hello.
We can hear you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we can use basically. Yeah. So what else are the other tools that we can use while we start off with the design thinking researches, like for brainstorming or for coming out with the ideas?
So actually,
other than an in-depth interview or a desktop research. Yeah.
So actually, there are a lot of like it's the list of tools to use is actually very long. Like there are tools for planning, there are tools for brainstorming, there are tools for prioritizing your ideas, there's a tool for research, and like I can actually share one open source repository that we have worked on, which like has all of these tools mentioned, and like I can take you through some particular ones if you want to, but I'll just share this link. I think it will help all of you like even figure out like what, but like the design thinking tool set is like very expansive. There are a lot of different things that can be used. I've linked this one toolkit, and then if you Google, there'll be many others as well. But this is one that we have helped create and also use in our work. And I think this should give you a good sense. It also tells you how to use it, and there are files that you can print out. And yeah, I would suggest this as a starting point for that. Yeah. For research itself, just wanted to add because this came to my mind. Given now there's this pandemic and it's difficult to actually meet people physically, what also might be useful is certain auto ethnography methods. Like we try to do stuff over WhatsApp, where if we are trying to understand, again, sorry, going back to the TB patients example, we could almost have like a 4-part questionnaire that you send this patient and tell them the next time you visit your health facility, take a video of your waiting area where you're waiting and record some thoughts like that you are having while you are there. Like maybe they will say the waiting is too long, or the space is too dirty, or like that. And then you can have 4 tasks like this. The next task could be once you've received your medicines, or once you've come out of the doctor's out of the doctor's chamber, then again record a voice note of your thoughts and how you're feeling now, and was it a good experience visiting. And so, and this doesn't require any physical interaction with them, but you can like still get a lot of their like first-hand experience and first-hand stories by creating such like tasks for them to do over WhatsApp itself. So that could be something interesting to explore, uh, to like just get those stories from for you, the users that you're building for. Yeah.
If I can ask a question, so wanted to find out whether, like, once you publish a toolkit or a resource, how do you iterate it further? Like things may change. Your basic premises that you use for designing the resource may actually be different in different contexts. So do we go through this entire process again while we are adapting it into a different socio-cultural context? Like you designed a community advocacy toolkit for say Tamil Nadu. If you want to apply the same in an urban area in a national capital region, what do you do?
Danny, you want to, or I can?
Yeah, I mean, I can just add on like a little bit, but yeah, I think the very important part of design thinking is to keep in mind the context that you're designing for, and to keep in mind the user that you're sort of designing for. So when you take it from place to place, you have to make sure that these changes or these nuances of the place that you're taking to are sort of considered and added in the toolkit. So it may be maybe changing the language or doing some local research before you do the change, or trying to sort of make it incremental in terms of what are you adding to it, are you adding any local resources. So I think a certain amount of research would go into making a toolkit that is commonly designed for a very local area or a context. So I think, yeah, that would need some work if you're designing for something very specific, like in terms of place or language.
Yeah, so I'm also just reflecting on some work we've done in the past, and it's yeah, like at the base of it, there will need to be changes, but I don't think we'll have to change the entire structure of the toolkit itself. Like I think it's more about the content, or the if it's question based, the questions we're asking. For example, we have created this toolkit for three countries: Laos, Thailand, and Indonesia. The structure was more or less the same. What we had to change was more, like Dani mentioned, the the maybe the wordings and how we were asking certain questions, removing some of the parts and changing it to some other based on the context. Some places we had images, so we had to change the images. Like a guitar wasn't working in one of the countries, so we had to put something else there instead. But I still think the framing or the structure remains the same. For example, if you see this link that I've just shared with you, uh, the the flow I don't think will change a lot. What might change is the uh, actual like questions in each tool, or like even the words within the questions. But like at the very foundational level, the things we build or the toolkits we build like have a very universal structure to it.
Are there any more questions or comments? If not, we can call it a day. I sincerely thank Aditya and Dhyani for sparing their time. So it was indeed a very new topic to people from public health background, even though we work a lot with communities, and we try to design healthcare interventions which work for people in low resource settings. We are not exposed to many of these nuances of human-centered design, behavioral economics, and uh, even basic theories of behavioral change. So it was indeed a good experience. I think probably it's probably for the first time that many of us are hearing about these techniques and tools and processes that we have to use for designing a healthcare intervention or a healthcare product that has optimal uptake. So thank you so much, Aditya and Dhyani, for the session and all the time you have spared for us. Thank you. So just before we close, we have another session on the 18th of this month. Again, we'll be focusing more on the behavioral change communication part of it, looking at various community engagement models and behavioral change theories. It will be led by Sarah Iqbal. Sarah Iqbal is um, was formerly with the Welcome DBT India Alliance and with the University of Oxford. Now she leads several public engagement initiatives across the country. And regarding the competition, the whole idea of this competition is to make sure that people learn about, at least the public health students or public health enthusiasts learn about these basic principles of designing a healthcare intervention or communicating about a pertinent health problem to the general public. We assume certain things and design our messages are based on our assumptions, which is most of the time erroneous or even dubious at times. So that is a huge challenge that we are facing, especially in the middle of a pandemic and otherwise also. So once our assumption was, or rather our hypothesis was, that if people have an optimal understanding about design thinking and behavioral change communication and behavioral economics, that will actually lead to more efficient healthcare communication, more efficient advocacy efforts, and of course more efficient and optimally uptaken healthcare interventions, which especially with the resource limited settings in mind. So that was the whole idea of this competition. I'm sure some of you may have thought about ideas of what to put in as entries, but then the inputs given by Dhyani and Aditya will go a long way in improving our understanding of the domain. So thank you so much once again. So have a nice day. Bye. Take care.
Thank you everyone.